want you to start by telling me what your full name is.
Shall I look at the camera?
Now you can look right here at me.
Okay.
You're just talking to me.
Okay. My name is Louise Mabel Gash.
Well, let's see. And what was your maiden name?
Louise Mabel Pimentel.
Okay. What were your parents' names?
My father's name was Anton Enos Pimentel. And my mother's name, her maiden name,
Sure.
Mary Louise Sylvester.
Sylvester.
Mm-hmm.
Where was she born?
Oakland.
Oakland. Do you happen to know when she was born? What year, roughly? Okay.
I used to know, but I forgot.
When was your father born?
Where was he born?
When or where? You don't remember
I
when?
can't remember.
When?
I've got it somewhere, but I've forgotten.
Okay. Where was he born?
He was born in the Azores, and he came to the United States when he was 15 years old.
Let's see. Can you tell us anything interesting about your father? What do you do for a living?
My goodness. He did many things. He was an express man. He had an express wagon. And
So that's like moving.
yeah, moving.
Okay.
He did that for several years. But before he did that, he was a farmer. He raised turkeys.
No, I don't think I was aware of that.
Yeah.
Was that here in Fresno?
Yes, it was Friant.
Oh.
And he would raise, many, say about 500 turkeys. And then he moved to Fresno, and he built a house on McKinley, and he was a farmer there. And then after that is
McKinley and what, roughly?
well, about 2 or 3, maybe 5 miles from 99 towards where Bill is. Which way would that be? Right
Okay, it's out in the country,
Yeah,
out
yeah.
west of here.
Yeah, west.
Okay.
I'm making a mess of this.
Now you're doing just fine.
And let's see, and then he worked for my grandmother after her husband died, and he took care of her business because she had quite a few ranches, and he took care of all her business, the ranches and the men and everything.
Well, let's see. How did he happen to get into the express business?
Well, he had a friend by the name of Saul Pizer. He used to be a shoe man at a shoe store. And he used to stop there. And then he thought, well, he'd go into the express business. And then he stopped there. That's where he used to stop for his business. And then he made good, very good. But he got up all hours of the night, all hours of the morning. He had to go out for business, but he made very well.
Well, what kind of things did he move?
Everything from pianos, anything from
Did he move this stuff all by himself?
all by himself. He had a fellow one time to help him move a piano, the only time he ever had any help. And the house was on Broadway, the rooming house, and he was helping my father, and he left his and go, and the piano landed on Mariposa Street. But my father says, never again. I did this all by myself for years, and never, unless this has cost me $500. You want me to tell you all this?
Sure. I find it very interesting. How did he finally get out of the business?
Well, then my grandfather died, and my grandmother wanted somebody to help her with her business because she had quite a few farms.
Okay. Now let's see. Do you know anything about how your mother and father happened to meet?
He was working for my grandfather out on a ranch,
Yeah.
and he met my mother, and he fell in love with her. Was very much against my grandfather's wishes because he wanted her to go to the Catholic school, and he didn't, and he wanted her to, be like a teacher or something like that in the Catholic business or whatever, and he was very much against her marrying my father. But they were very good friends afterwards.
Well, let's see. Let's go back. Let's see. We could skip around a little bit. Let's go back another generation. Tell me about your grandparents. Tell me, what do you know about your mother's parents? I know, but let's hear it anyway.
All right. Well, my grandmother, she married a Mr. Sylvester, which was my mother's father.
Okay. Do you know what your grandmother's full name was?
No, I don't. I've got it all written down, but I have forgotten.
Okay. And so she married Mr. Sylvester.
He was a mean devil.
He was a what?
Mean devil.
A mean devil.
He really was.
Right.
And she had 3 children, and he was so mean. He used to beat her up, bump her head against the wall, pull her hair, that she left him.
Okay, so
And she took her children with her.
your mother was one of those children.
Yeah, my mother was one.
And who were the other 2?
It was Miss Minnie Martin
Uh-huh.
and Constance Medina. That's
Okay.
Lee's mother.
Lee's mother.
Uh-huh. And then she worked in Oakland for a lady that was really nice. And she worked, and then Mr. Silva happened to come in there and eat, because she had like I wouldn't say a restaurant, apartment house, I guess, and she would feed the guys that lived there.
Yeah.
And my grandmother used to work there. And then she fell in love with Mr. Silva, Frank Silva. He fell in love with my grandmother, and then they got married.
Let's see, where was your grandmother born?
She was born in the Azores also, but different place than my father.
Okay, so,
My grandmother was born what they call the Peak. And my father was born in the Azores where they call the Floors.
okay. So,
Shaken.
why? This make you nervous? Lights a little too, well?
No, it's not that.
Okay.
Just wondering what's going on.
Well,
I'm
finding out about the
whether
family.
it's worse. I could tell it and you could write it.
Well, I'd rather get it this way. I don't write too well. I don't write very fastly, so we'll just get it on tape. Let's see. Tell us something about Frank Silva. What he did, where'd he come from? Well,
He comes from the Azores too,
He was from the Azores.
but I don't remember what place in the Azores.
Okay.
It's a big
And,
place.
You know anything about his parents?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But he was
did he ever mention what his father did?
I was only 12 years old when he died.
Uh-huh.
But he was a wonderful man. He was my godfather.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a wonderful man. Everything he touched turned to gold.
Okay. And were you, let's see, he raised owned a lot of sheep here.
A lot of sheep.
Uh-huh.
He was the sheep king of Fresno, I think of California.
Uh-huh.
He had more sheep, but when he died, we couldn't find his sheep. That's the truth.
They just kind of took off? Or?
They kind of took off, and the guys that he hired took off too. And of course, things then are not like they are now.
Now, let's see. I think I recall you saying something about him riding in parades.
Yes, he always led the parade here in Fresno.
Uh-huh.
I guess
And there was
the
something
4th of
about
July,
a
I think.
saddle.
Beautiful silver-mounted saddle, everything on the horse silver, and there was a registered Morgan, and he always was the leader of the parades here with a
Huh.
beautiful horse.
What
happened to
about
the
what year
saddles?
would that be?
Well, he died in 1912,
Uh-huh.
and it was before 1912 for a few years.
Okay. So he, didn't he also have something to do with the Bermuda grass?
Yes. Of all things, he had a lot of cattle, of course, and
Uh-huh.
sheep and things, and he thought that that would make wonderful pasture land. So from somewhere, I don't know where, but not here in the United States, out of the United States, he got all the seed to plant Bermuda grass. We had no Bermuda grass
Huh.
until then. He
Well,
saw
I'm sure a lot of the local folk are grateful to him for that.
grateful. Yeah, grateful.
Okay, let's see, let's skip around a little bit more. What about, what about your grandparents on your other side? Do you know anything about your father's parents?
No, I don't know his parent. You mean the mother and father?
Yeah.
His father was killed. He died. His son, Joe Pimentel, was very sick, and he would like to have some clams
This was in the Azores. Okay.
And so he said to his father, "I'd like to have some." And it was a very bad day. The ocean was very rough.
Uh-huh.
And but he thought, my son is so sick, I'm going to go get him some. And all they found was his coat.
Huh. No, that's
That was
very
sad.
Yeah.
My father used to say he was a wonderful father.
Do you know what his name was, or you can't remember?
Can't remember. Papa told me all this, but I can't remember.
Well, but what about his mother? Do you know anything about her?
She married a guy that was very rich after his death, years after his death.
Uh-huh.
And then he was a Jew,
Uh-huh.
and he went ahead and built a nice big place there at the Azores where they live, and a store and a restaurant and everything. And he wanted to marry, oh, wait a minute. Then they were going to have a child, and
Yeah.
they had twins, and they
Uh-huh.
both died, and then my father's mother died too,
Oh.
having birth to the twins. And then he wanted my father's sister to marry him. That was the oldest girl, Mary. But she didn't want to marry his stepfather.
Hmm.
And so he left there, but he left everything to the kids.
How many brothers and sisters did your father have?
I think he had, let's see,
What were their names?
I think, all right, it was Joe and John.
He's the one that was sick.
Yeah,
Okay.
he didn't die though.
Right. He got better. His
So they all
father
come over
disappeared though.
here. Yeah, his father disappeared. Oh, and they all came to the United States.
Uh-huh.
And Joe and John and my father.
Mhm.
Well, I guess that's all of the boys. And
Okay.
then-
Were there any girls?
yeah, it was Mary and Leonora and Mary.
Was there another one?
Yes, I can't think of her first name.
Okay. Now you said they all came to
The United States.
Where did they settle down?
In Fresno.
They all in the Fresno area?
All in Fresno.
So, are there any of their descendants still around here?
Laura Silva,
Okay. And her
pardon me,
father was who?
was, he was a Silva, but I can't remember his first name.
Okay,
No,
her-
Manuel.
Okay.
Okay, Manuel Silva. Laura's father.
Okay.
Okay.
And gonna sound just fine, Grandma. You comfortable?
Mhm.
Can I get you a glass of water or anything?
Mhm.
All right. Well, let's see, there was, most of the family was Catholic for
Yes.
a long time,
Yes.
weren't they?
Yes, they were
Well,
born
tell us
Catholics.
about that. They were born Catholics.
Yeah. But then afterwards, shall I tell about Brother Opie?
Sure, tell us all.
Yeah. Well, Brother Opie came to Fresno,
Uh-huh.
and and he brought us the true Bible. And
What's wrong, Grandma? You okay?
am I right?
What are you thinking about? What are you nervous
Just
about?
think about the whole thing.
Oh. Would you like a handkerchief?
No, I have one.
Okay, all right. Well, how did your family happen to stop being Catholics?
Well, I was going to Catholic school, and I was going to be a nun.
You're going to be a nun? Okay.
I'm so thankful I wasn't.
Me too. I wouldn't be around.
And Brother Opie used to talk to my father, and his sister Mary was the first one in the family that got saved.
Uh-huh.
And so she used to come around and tell my father and us and talk to the rest. And my father used to say, "You keep all this to yourself. I don't want to hear that. I'm a Catholic, and I'm going to die a Catholic."
Uh-huh.
And poor thing, she used to cry
Yeah.
to think we had no salvation. And so she talked to my father, and she prayed, and she prayed. And so one day, my father went to church, to Brother Opie's church.
Uh-huh.
And he says, "Nobody talks to me. I'm going to sit in the back seat. I don't want anybody to talk to me. If this is the real religion,
Uh-huh.
I'll get it. But if it's not, I'm going to die a Catholic."
Uh-huh.
So she left him alone, and she prayed for him, and she had Brother Opie to pray for him. And so one day he went to church, and the Lord spoke to my father, and he went forward, and he gave the Lord his heart just like this, and he was the happiest man that ever lived.
Well, that's good. That's very touching. But he just wanted to sit in the back. He didn't want anybody to talk to him.
Well, because he wanted to be sure it's the Lord, not the people that wanted him to go forward, that he wouldn't listen. He wanted, if it was what the Lord wanted him to do, he would do.
So then you stopped going to Catholic school?
I quit going to Catholic school and felt very bad. I was going to be a nun.
Mm-hmm.
He sent me to the church,
Yeah.
the Pentecostal church, and for 1 year I wouldn't listen to even the teacher.
Uh-huh.
I was going to be a nun. And he was such a good teacher.
How old were you at this point?
I guess about 13, 14 years old.
Okay.
And so the teacher, he was so good, and I told him, I says, "I'm not wanting to be here, but my father makes me come. But I'm a Catholic, and I'm going to die Catholic. I'm going to be a nun." And so the guy was very good to me, the teacher.
Uh-huh.
And I guess he prayed for me and all. And 1 year after that,
Uh-huh.
I guess the Lord spoke to me. And I got saved.
Well, that's good. Well, let's see. You kids weren't raised knowing English, were you?
No, not when we went to school. Not until we went to
Now,
school.
you were born here in Fresno,
Yeah.
right?
But my father used to say, "You're Portuguese and you're going to learn the language. English, you'll learn that for sure because you live here in this country. But
Yeah.
Portuguese, if you don't learn that, the first thing you will ever know anything about it."
So they just spoke Portuguese
Just
around
spoke
the house.
Portuguese.
Uh-huh.
My mother was born here, though she wasn't born in Portugal. She was born in São Leandro, or Oakland, which I say Oakland.
Oakland,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when I went to school, The teacher will ask me anything. Well, I tell her in Portuguese, I don't understand what you're talking about in Portuguese. Well, she was real mean to me. She used to pinch me, slap my face, pull my hair. My sister Helen went to school with me. No, not Helen, Lenora with me at the same time.
Yeah.
Well, Lenora let me do all the talking. But when they used to slap Lenora, then I used to fight the teacher. But it didn't take me about 6 months to learn to speak English and understand what the teacher said.
When did you start going to school?
When I was 6 years old, the Hawthorne.
Okay.
And I began to be the teacher's pet.
Mm-hmm.
I was so fair and my face was so red. The teacher didn't want me to get out in the sun. I was the teacher's pet.
Mm-hmm.
She's the one that used to slap me, pinch me, and everything.
Mm.
But I learned to speak English. And then I forgot my Portuguese. Now I can hardly speak it.
Now where was the Hawthorne School?
Oh, they're on Merced, and on Merced, I can't think of that other street before you get to Fresno Street.
Now, where did you live at this
In
time?
Effie, I lived at 365 Effie.
Uh-huh.
Just a few blocks, not too many blocks away.
Now, when did you learn to drive?
When I was 12 years old, a Model T Ford.
Uh-huh.
In those days, you could drive. It wasn't like today. Of course, my father was very strict.
Yeah.
But I started driving a Model T Ford, and then later we had a Page car, what they called a Page, and I learned to drive that. And I guess I've driven till about 2 years ago.
How did you happen to learn how to drive?
Well, my mother never did learn to drive, and she used to want to go places, and my father was so busy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say to Mama, I can take you there, I can drive. Well, my father we had a ranch out in the country where Bill lives now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used to go with my father. We were out there, and there wasn't too many cars in those days. And my father used to let me drive the Model T Ford way out in the country.
Yeah.
But I thought I knew how to drive, and I did, because I used to take my mother every place in town. There wasn't too many cars. I knew how to start it, knew how to put on my brakes.
Mm-hmm.
Never had a wreck. And so then we had another car, Stevens,
Now, where did you take her on her first ride?
to the cemetery. Take flowers to the graves.
Was there any problems?
No problems whatsoever.
Not that you got trouble back in the house.
Oh, yes.
See, I'm trying to
Yeah.
ask leading questions
Yeah.
and stories
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
before.
I couldn't back up.
Uh-huh.
And the graves are so close together, the streets are so narrow.
Yeah.
In those days, they didn't have streets like they have out there now. And I thought, I don't want to drive over the graves, and I'd have to back out, so I wouldn't turn around and drive over the graves. And so I sat there and played with the thing to find out the steering, not the steering wheel,
Gear
but
shift.
the shift.
Uh-huh.
And it happened that I caught it on reverse. And then when I caught it on reverse, that was my first lesson
Uh-huh.
in driving backwards. Yeah. You didn't forget that, did you?
Now, let's see, what other interesting stories have I heard? Oh, you were telling us about electricity being installed over there.
And in Fresno.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know how old I was. Let's see. Well, that was after my grandfather died.
Okay, now didn't your father have some mistaken ideas about the healthful influences of electricity?
Yes,
Well, tell
uh-huh.
us about that.
Well, somebody told my father that if you went ahead and could take those shocks, it was good for you, good for your nerves.
Yeah.
And so, out at 379, it's a duplex now.
Yeah.
My father went up there with, what did I say it was, a screwdriver or?
I don't
was
remember
there
that
a
part.
pair of pliers or something
Yeah.
beside. And he went to touch the, what's that thing, switch, I guess, of the,
A circuit breaker?
yeah, I guess it must
Or
be where you put the switch.
Fuse box?
Well, do you pull the switch in to start the
In
electricity.
those days, it would have been the fuse box.
Yeah, okay. And I said, well, can I do it too, Dad? I used to be very close to my father. I was more like a boy.
Yeah,
My sister was more close to my mother, and she was the youngest.
yeah.
And so my dad, okay, it's good for me, it's good for you. So he thought, boy, we really got a shock. It just knocked us down. It's a good thing it did, because it could have killed us, I guess, huh?
I do imagine, yeah.
It knocked us both down in the back porch.
Mhm.
We never tried it
Oh,
again.
you just tried it the one.
Oh, just the once,
Oh.
that was enough. After that, I was afraid of electricity.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. I see sparks or anything, I was scared to death of electricity. It's a wonder it didn't kill us.
Well,
It could have, couldn't it?
you're very
If we were
fortunate.
standing where it was wet or something like that, it would have killed us maybe, huh?
I don't know, it's hard to say in a situation like that. Let's just say you're fortunate to be here.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, let's see, what other stories have I
I
heard?
imagine there's lots we're leaving behind.
Okay, well, I'm gonna turn this off for just a second.
My grandmother was in court, I don't know how many years, and it cost her $150,000
This was after your grandfather
when
died.
my grandfather died.
Oh, yeah, tell us about that. What happened?
Is that on now?
Yeah.
And my uncle, John Pimentel, my father's brother, he wanted the money, and so he went to a lawyer and was trying to tell the lawyer that my grandmother was not married to my grandfather, and that my grandfather had children, and that it was children
By somebody else.
by somebody else.
Uh-huh.
And so my grandmother had to get a lawyer, and I don't know how many years she was in court. And then these kids come from Portugal also, from
Yeah.
the Azores.
Yeah.
And after they got the birth certificate, after being in court all those years, they found out the kids were younger than the father, than Mr. Silva.
You mean older then?
No, older.
The kids were older than
No,
than,
he was
Mr.
young.
Silva.
Yeah, older.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, older. They were older than Mr. Silva. It was impossible for these kids, for him to be the father. But they wanted to prove that he had kids to take all that money from my grandmother.
Uh-huh.
And there was nothing but a bunch of lies in court. And my poor grandmother went through so much.
Hmm.
And oh, I guess there's so much.
Didn't her lawyer wind up with a bunch of money?
Yeah, I did, but yeah, this was Mr. Gallagher. He wound up with lots of money, and this other lawyer, I can't think of his name. He was a wonderful lawyer. He come out the house one night and he says, "I'll get you out of this."
Uh-huh.
And this Mr. Gallagher was with my uncle together, and they were just draining her. But after this other lawyer got in there, that was it. That was the last fight.
Hmm.
Lawyers can be crooked too.
Yes, I suppose they can. Well, what other interesting stories
Yeah,
have
that's what-
taken place in your family?
Oh, somebody set fire to our house one night. Let me
Okay.
say that.
Sure.
All right.
I mean, that sounds like an excellent story.
Well, my grandmother was alone, lived alone, and her husband had died, and Papa had left town that day to go to the ranches, and because there was cattle that had to be branded, and so my grandmother says to Mama, "Come over and live with us. Come over and stay with us, and I'm going to build a couple more rooms to the house, and you folks can come and live with us." And so that night, we went. My father was gone, and around say 2 o'clock in the morning, my mother was smelling smoke, and so she thought, I'm not dreaming, and so she looked down on the floor, and the smoke was coming through the floor of our bedroom. And so she got us kids out of bed, and then she went and woke up my grandmother, and then called the fire department. And they only were 1 block away from us on McKenzie and Effie. It was the fire department then.
Yeah.
And then they come, and there was our whole house underneath was burned. Somebody had set the fire to burn us all. See, my father wasn't there.
Mhm.
And they were trying to say my father was the one that did it.
Hmm.
So, of course, we had to prove that my father was at the ranch. And the men knew he was there at the time that this happened. But the trouble was, it was on my grandmother's side of the family. Her one brother, son-in-law, was a terrible guy, and he wanted to get all the money from my grandmother, wanted to kill my grandmother, kill us, and he married one of the daughters, so he felt like that probably my father going to jail. Well, but they proved that my father was there at the ranch.
What was his name?
That was Mr. Martin, Frank Martin.
Frank Martin?
Frank Martin.
So he was the guy that probably did it.
Well, or had somebody to do it. We never did. We thought it was two guys that we had in mind that he could have paid to do it, but we just thought, let's drop it.
Yeah.
And then we had a barn with horses, and my father had a barn with horses and surreys and that saddle, that silver-mounted saddle.
Yeah.
And there was 7 barns. Somebody set them afire too one night. And
Now this was in the area around
yeah,
Effie?
right there.
Uh-huh.
379 Effie.
Yeah.
And we lived 2 doors down. 7 barns across the street, across the alley, and ours that night burned. And we had a time getting the horses and the cows out of the barns because the fire, they usually run to fire instead of running away from fire,
Mhm.
the animals. And that was also set one night.
So that the old garage over on Effie used to be used for
For our cars. But
cars.
that used to, before that was built, that was barns.
Okay, so that was
But somebody set a fire to the second bunch of barns. We built the second bunch of barns.
so the first ones probably weren't brick.
No,
Okay.
just wood.
Uh-huh.
And then we thought there'll be no more barns, so we built a garage. And then we got a Model T Ford, that was afterwards. We
Mhm.
didn't have cars then, we had horses.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very interesting.
Very interesting, bad things. Huh?
Well, you learn a lot of different things. Okay, well we're gonna take a little break now.